think McKinsey mainly stands for growth. On the one hand, for businesses and improving their operations, and on the other hand, for people as well, because that's what they promise the people joining them.
When I personally think about McKinsey, what comes to my mind is that they're involved at every front end in every industry that we see out there.
Often we male are characterized as a testosterone dominant or alpha male culture, you can call it however you like. And sometimes methods might be unconventional.
I do think that the mindset shift hasn't really gone far enough, especially maybe in some leaders of the older generation.
Gender differences brings more fruitful conversations, more fruitful way of thought, and that's definitely the way to go. And not just gender differences, I mean all differences.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is just still morning. I'm Stephen Sacker, and some of you will be thinking, oh God, not him again. But here I am back in St. Gallen. We don't have to applaud yet. Nothing's happened yet. We can save that for later. But it's a great pleasure for me to be back with you. I think this is my 6th or maybe even my 7th St. Gallen Symposium. So I always look forward to early May and coming back here. And it isn't even raining, so it's actually really a very, very special St. Gallen. For those of you who don't know me, I present a show called Hard Talk on the BBC. I've just had a tough old week interviewing Sergei Lavrov in Moscow and then one of President Assad's biggest backers in Damascus. I wasn't in Damascus, but it was on a satellite link. And I can tell you both those interviews were so combative and contentious. And the Lavrov one ended with him shaking my hand and then saying, "That was," and then a word that began with B and ended with a T and sort of... You get the picture. So it is such a relief to be here.
I think I'm leaving.
Such a relief to be here with Dominic. And let me just give you a very quick introduction to Dominic, and then we'll get going, because we don't have that long. I'm guessing that half of you in the room want to work for this guy, and the other half probably did work for this guy at some point. At an event like this in St. Gallen, with so many of you interested in the world of business or in the world of business, it's like interviewing a rock star. I mean, this guy is in his 3rd term leading McKinsey. And as you know, McKinsey has a very special way of working. They have to vote upon their leader. All the partners get a vote, and he can't be doing a bad job, at least in terms of where McKinsey is, because he's now in his 3rd term. And there is term limits, so he can't even run for a 4th term if he wants to. And we'll talk about that a bit later. But under his watch, McKinsey has grown. I think it's fair to say, gone from strength to strength, doing what it does. And we will discuss what it does in some detail. I mean, there are interesting quotes that we saw on that video about the degree to which he is seen to be in a world of high testosterone, alpha male, sort of neoliberal economics, driving a sort of capitalist, globalist agenda. He's nodding quietly. You know, what is McKinsey all about? That will come up in this conversation, but we are part of the overall theme, which is considering what next in the world of work, indeed maybe even beyond the world of work. So first of all, before we get going, please give Dominic Barton a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Right, so Dominic, you write a lot. Not only do you lead McKinsey, you write and think a lot about capitalism and the future of capitalism and the future of work. And in your latest book, you say that the corporate world has actually underestimated the importance of human beings and the human resource within. And yet, at the same time, here we are at a conference which is all about the supposition that the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, everything from 3D printing to driverless cars is actually reducing the economic importance of human beings. While at the very same time, your message is, no, human beings are more important than we ever realized. So try and square that circle for me.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And again, it's wonderful to be here. I have to say it's with some trepidation that I'm with this gentleman, because I saw him take apart the Syrian on the shore, and I said, wow, I'm going to be seeing him in a few days in that, which I think you did well. But it's great to be here. I think on the talent side, it's the last book I've done while I've been at McKinsey, and it's because I think I'm a slow learner. And one of the things I do is when I meet with CEOs, I'll always ask, and I try and see 2 a day, what would you teach your younger self if you could? What would be the topics that would be a focus? And what I heard all the time, no matter what the industry, no matter what the region, was talent. I would have moved people out of their roles faster. I would have moved people up into roles faster, and I would have spent more time on talent. Because at the end of the day, it's talent that drives strategy. It's talent that comes up with the technology. It's talent. And so you're right in the sense that we're in this world with all of this technological revolution going on, automation, which is going to replace some of the existing roles. But it's automation without talent, in my view, is not going to generate results. And so that's where, and we think that, in fact, the returns to talent, I would be careful about being elitist about this, but the returns to talent are escalating, and we're seeing that in technology. WhatsApp, I think it was 19 people that generated a company that sold for tens of billions of dollars. And so the difference between average talent and top talent is significant. And then how you develop talent and leaders in a world which is changing faster and faster. That's why I think it's a key and core agenda.
But you just said, one has to be careful about being elitist, but actually it is a message that is all about elites. Because just doing some reading around what you've been saying about talent and human resource, your message is that in any corporation, whatever, even if it's a corporation that is global in scale and has many, many thousands of workers, there are probably only 30 or 40 people that really, really matter to the future of that company in terms of innovation, creative ideas, leadership, and pushing the company forward. So if only those very few truly matter, what happens to the rest?
Well, I would put it a little bit different. I don't think that it's that they matter. It's that and we said it's sort of 2% of people in an organization drive an extraordinary amount of value in any given period. That doesn't mean you don't take care of the other 98%. They have to be engaged. If you don't have an engaged workforce overall, you're not going to get anywhere with that. What we're saying though is there are typically a very small number of people, and they're not typically at the top of the organization. They're actually far down in the organization that drive a lot of the value. And if you think about a machine tooling company with 12,000 people that wants to improve its performance significantly, what most organizations do, including ourselves, is we look at where's the value creation opportunity. It's a lot of that's benchmarking and financial analysis. And then only at the end do we sort of think about the people that will drive it. And in that 12,000 person, machine tooling company that, let's say, wants to improve their EBITDA from 600 million to $1 billion, it turns out to be 37 people that actually matter in terms of making the biggest delta. And a chunk of those people are actually in procurement, right? Because that's where a lot of the value is actually going to be. So it's not meant to say that the 98% don't matter. An organization has to be engaged, but at any given time in an organization, there is a granular group that you need to make sure you know who those people are, who are going to drive an extraordinary amount of the value creation. That may change over a 3-year period to a different group, but you need to make sure you understand that group.
Right. One of your remits as the leader of McKinsey has been to sort of do a lot of, I hate this phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway, blue sky thinking about the future of capitalism. Yeah. So, there are many people out there, many of them writing influential books, who say that capitalism is on its last legs. We're already into a post-capitalist era, driven by the internet, the digital age, the sharing economy, very different hierarchies, and a very different concept of things like competition. Are you part of that? Do you think we're in a post-capitalist age?
I don't. But I do think capitalism has to change or maybe go back to what it used to be. So in McKinsey we're called a lot of nasty names, and we deserve that. But one I do like is we're known as...
Which nasty ones do you deserve?
Well, I'll come back to that later. We'll come back to that later. There's a lot. Take the rest. But it is, the one I like is that people are saying we're the Jesuits of capitalism. So I'm a believer in capitalism. But I actually think capitalism has kind of lost its way in the last 30 years. And so what I started to write about it was, I actually moved from Asia to London, and again, I just noticed a very big difference in the time frames that CEOs were working on. So capitalism, I think, has become more short-term, quarterly focused. It's become less inclusive, and it's become less owner-oriented in where it is. That was the shift. And I think the other element about capitalism as it relates to this topic at St. Gallen is, in capitalism, you are going to have inequality, and I make no bones about. I believe that is part and parcel of capitalism. But what's unacceptable is, inequality of opportunity to be able to participate, and I think that's where we have some big issues that we're dealing with. It is some people win the lottery. I was with a group of young global leaders and said, we've all won the lottery because we had a good education and we had an opportunity. There's a lot of people that didn't, who, by the way, I definitely know are more talented than I am in where they were. And that's the part that's unacceptable. And if we don't figure out how to fix that in a world that's moving even faster in terms of reskilling, then the system will be challenged. And that's where I think we need to focus.
But the system is breaking down, is it not, in various different ways? I mean, in one way, if we're talking about the world of work, workers seem to have so much less leverage. I mean, I'm talking about the traditional, the phrase would be shop floor worker, although very few people work in shop floors anymore. But the worker at the sharp end of an organization, whether it be serving customers in a supermarket chain at the cash till, or whether it be a warehouseman at Amazon, these sorts of workers have less leverage than ever before. Their trades unions are less powerful, even if they have a union, and many of them don't. And the gap between what they earn and what the CEO and the C-suite team earn is greater than ever before. It used to be a multiple in the 20s and 30s, and now it's often a multiple in the hundreds, or many hundreds.
Yeah, 300 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a sickness? And if that continues, where does it end?
Well, I think it will be. I think it will corrode and kill the system if, again, there isn't the opportunity for people to participate. What I actually think is going on is another factor too, which is the returns. Maybe it's the same thing you're saying. The returns to capital are more than the returns to labor. There's
more so than ever, and you don't have to be Thomas Piketty to sort of see.
Yeah. So I think that's a phenomenon we have to look at, and how can people participate in that system? Another thing that worries me, by the way, is we're seeing a big decrease in the number of publicly listed companies. It's been cut in half over the last 15 years. That's a problem, because if I think about my father, who's a clergyman, his pension was based on investing in some banks in Canada, basically. If he didn't have somewhere to invest his money, he wouldn't have had he participated in the capitalist system, even though he wasn't part of it. It was a pension, publicly listed companies. So there are I think it's becoming increasingly harder too for people to participate in that system when we have that kind of a shift that's going on as well. The bigger worry I have, I agree with what you said about on the shop floor, that we're seeing automation hit that in the hospitality industry and so forth. I think a bigger worry I would have right now is in the middle class, because when we look at the impact of automation, and it's going to change everything. We're all going to have to be reskilled. 30% of what I do, according to my colleagues, probably more 70% other colleagues would say could be automated. So we all are being affected by this, but it's the middle class group that's going to be affected a lot. If you think about banking, and you think about financial advisors, that's a well-paid job in places like Canada, $75,000 to $100,000 a year. That is going to get automated very quickly.
And you could talk about paralegals, you could talk about
accountant,
general practitioner doctors, you could talk about a whole raft of white-collar jobs.
And the other challenge with this is I think it's it's adults. It's the average age of that segment, and it depends on the industry and the country, but if I was to just average it, it would be about 38 years old. So this isn't young people that are, or really young people, that are being affected. It's people that are working, may have young kids, may have a mortgage. You know, they can't leave and they can't come to St. Gallen and do 2 years or what. They can't go off to, we have to figure out how to reskill people at that level. And that's a different type of a challenge. I think we've had, in the other industrial revolutions, we've had that at the front line. It's not good. We've not done a very good job about dealing with it. But we've now got another group that's going to be dealt with. And what I worry about is the speed with which this is happening. We've had a longer digestion period in the previous revolutions. This one, as far as what I've seen other people talking about, is we've got 12 to 15 years where a lot of people are going to be affected. So we don't have a lot of time to figure this out. And that's where I worry about the stability, because people will believe this system's not fair, and I can't.
But Dominic, you worry about it, and yet, going back to you being the Jesuit of liberal capitalism, you're the guy whose company goes around the world advising other companies to lay off workers. I mean,
tough one, yeah, and we do.
That's what you do. You go in and you sort of consult and you say, you know what, you can get rid of a tranche of workers here. You can do this more efficiently with machines. You can essentially up your productivity and up your profits by getting rid of a lot of the human element. I mean, are you recanting in your older age? Are you thinking, you know what, I wish I hadn't done a lot of that. That was the wrong way, and it actually is counterproductive for the greater public and human good.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, I think here's what I would say to that: is I'd say that the average lifetime of a S&P 500 company has gone. In 1935, which wasn't a great period to be on the S&P 500, 90 years. It's now about 15 years. So whether McKinsey's there or not, I'm saying there is change that is going. All organizations have to move. I, by the way, worry about ourselves. That's why because we like to tell other people what to do, but not do it ourselves, and we need to do a lot different. And so we're at 92 years, so I always keep that in mind. So there's change is inevitable, and it's going faster, and that does mean restructuring. What I would say is I don't think we can solve this problem by saying there's not going to be any more restructuring, because then the companies won't exist. They will disappear. So restructuring is necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I think what we should have been and could be doing much more is thinking about, okay, what happens with the dislocation of that workforce. There was some work we did in Germany in the past where remember it was around with Volkswagen, Volkswagen, and what would we try and do to try and move things. I don't honestly know how successful that was, but I think what we're very much focused on now is, it's not even for McKinsey, which you're right, we deserve. You said, yes, we do a lot of restructuring work. By the way, about 50% of our work is also growth work. It's about building new businesses. And
but even in
things.
growth, you're not necessarily recommending they expand their workforce.
Well, absolutely we are. It's not, the only challenge is it's not to the same extent as what's being taken out, right? If I was to say, if we were to do the scale and say how many people has McKinsey dislocated versus grown, I would definitely say we've dislocated more than we've grown. But there are lots of opportunities in this change.
I mean, dislocated is a bit, and restructuring, these are great words, but you mean fired.
Out of work, yeah. That's exactly right. But so my point, though, is that I think restructuring, firing people, taking people out of work, that is part of the process. And if you don't believe that, go back into your cocoon, because that's just not what's happening. And the challenge, I think, is, we'll say, what do we do about it? I think there's some very good early examples of what people are doing. I heard in the previous panel, just caught the tail end of it, but one organization that I admire a lot is AT&T. Randall Stephenson is a hardcore capitalist. He believes in shareholder value. He has put in place one of the most significant retraining, reskilling programs on the planet. He came out saying, we didn't say this, he said this, 40% of my workforce will not have the capabilities to do the skills that are required in 5 years in my company. They're at the tip of the spear of the technology change. But what he didn't do is say, therefore, we're taking them out, we're going to take a hit, and those we'll fire. What he said was, we're going to figure out how to reskill them. And he didn't do it for corporate social responsibility reasons. He worked with Georgia Tech, he worked with Udacity, an online training program, and sort of said, these are the skills that are going to be required. If you're working in a call center, which is going to be one of the first things that's going to get automated out, here are 3 jobs that we're going to need that we don't have people for, but these are the skills that are required. You, as a call center worker, if you take these 4 courses, by the way, 2 hours a week, you have to pay $200, you can get medallions and get reskilled. And they've 100,000 AT&T people have been reskilled through this program. It's extraordinary, and again, and so I think that's where there's light. There's a glimmer of light in what we can do, and that's done for good economic reasons in where it is. And I think that's something that we all need to be thinking about in what we're doing. You cannot discard people because you'll pay the price. I mean, like the price we will pay. Where, as you said, we fire a bunch of people, or I was in one of the sessions with the young global leaders. Some people said some nice things. One person I interested. In Denmark, you're really unpopular. I wouldn't wear a badge with McKinsey walking around, which is news to me. But I think that's what we have to be. We have to be aware of, because that, and then you don't have a license to operate in what you're doing, and you better start to take that into account in what you're doing. And I think there's a way through that.
A couple more from me, and then I'm going to open it up before we break for lunch. One of the wonderful things about St. Gallen is that so many of the people here and our audience and the people involved at every level are young. I mean, they're students, many of them. We talked earlier, we both have children who are of a certain age, sort of early 20s, been through university or at university. I have a kid who has just left university and he is now working as a barista. You said you had a kid who left university and his first job was milking cows on a dairy farm.
That's right.
Now, probably both of us, just in our traditional sort of way of seeing things and our assumptions and values, we're thinking, oh God, they don't remain on the cow farm or the coffee shop being a barista forever. That's probably not a career. But when you look at young people today, is your feeling, given what you see in the corporate world, that unless they become software engineers or in some way an expert in the digital economy, they're sort of economically dead, or what? What is your view of where young people need to go to be confident they're going to have a place in the 21st century world of work?
Well, I think one of the things, at least I'm trying to tell my son and my daughter and others, is that I think we first of all have to have a mindset that there's going to be lifelong learning. The idea that you finish in your when you're 23 years old, you're done, is, I think people will laugh at us in 15 years from that. This is going to be so this mindset of this has to be an ongoing learning, and you have to be. What I'm saying basically is, think about joining an organization that's actually focused on trying to make you employable for the long term, not giving you a job forever, but making you employable. Oliver Beta at Allianz has pushed this very hard. We're not going to guarantee you a job, but we're going to work hard to make sure you're employable. So looking for organizations that focus on training and talent. One of the worries I have is that overall globally, if you look at it, businesses are actually investing less in training than more. And the training that they do invest in is actually more at the top of the house versus the bottom. And so finding organizations that actually believe in training talent on an ongoing basis is very important, because you have to keep learning it. And I think it's hard skills and soft skills. I don't think I would be a terrible software. I couldn't code. I've tried. We've taken Python. We all do that. There's no one would hire me with any.
Yeah, but you're one of these classic over 55s that needs to be retrained from the last panel we heard about.
I know that.
And you've given us some thoughts about how young people need to approach the changing world of work. So let's talk about older folks like you and me. I mean, your job, you're not going to be fired, but you have run out of road in McKinsey. Right. So here's a serious question. You're obviously a highly employable, super networked individual at the very top of the global economy. What does a guy like you do next? I think people would be interested to know.
I didn't know we get this personal sessions, but I don't know is one thing I would just say honestly, because I've spent 32 years of my life kind of focused in one place. But the way I'm trying to think about it is thinking of, I hope, God willing, I could work for another 25 to 30 years. I'm a person that if I'm not working, I feel I'm not growing and I'm dying. I really feel you've got to be engaged, and I want to work. I'll work in the post office if I have. That's kind of my mindset. So I'm looking at, if I have 25 to 30 years.
I wouldn't go to the post office, because I'm not sure that's a growth industry. I think
that's probably right. Get restructured.
Snail mail may not be the way to go.
But what I would say is that, so I'm trying to look at this as though I'm 25. Okay, so I actually have a lot of discussions with my son in a very different way. I said, I'm like you. I know I'm older, and you probably don't want to hang around with me, but I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. And so what I'm thinking is I want to experiment with some things. I'm not, in McKinsey, we're not allowed to do investing, which I think is a good, that world interests me. I don't want to become an investor, but I want to learn more about it. So I'm thinking about spending some time with some investors on the venture capital side, just to learn a bit about what's happening on that front. So there's a range of areas where I think I don't know a lot that I'd like to try and see. And then I also feel I have more freedom, if you will, to take risk. And I'm interested in social issues. I'm very interested in education. I think education has so many orthodoxies that have to be challenged, and I'd love to, but I only know enough to be dangerous, so I have to learn it, get into it. So there's areas I want to explore, and I'm sort of looking at it as maybe I have a 3-year period of, it's like a university degree, but it's my own, where I'm going to try some different things, figure it out, and then maybe I'll land on something where I'm going. So that's.
But I'm incredibly struck by that phrase you just used, that if I'm not working, I feel I'm dying. There are certain economists who believe that, frankly, 30, 40 years from now, given the way the world is changing, 40 or 50% of us adults won't be working, because that's just the way the economy and the digital age will take us. You're suggesting that just won't work for us as a species.
It may. I may be a bizarre person, so I don't, but I may be more Calvinist, or I just believe it doesn't have to be, you're making a difference, or you're being productive, so it can be any type of work in that realm. But I think not doing anything or just relaxing. I mean, for me, a nightmare would just be to go sit on a beach somewhere with nothing. It's good to do that. I'm not suggesting I'm not a whack job. It's good, you need to relax, but to have nothing, I think I would atrophy. Because I think when you're working, you're engaging with people. There's ideas, there's challenges, there's issues. You're in working, I think you have to learn. So that's the part, and I don't know if working will become a vacation, maybe, is what you're saying down the road, but I feel the need to engage. By the way, it could also be volunteer work. It's not. No, you know what I'm saying.
I do. Yeah. You're using work in the biggest, broader, and that's partly what this whole St. Gallen is about. How we define work going forward. Okay, we've got time for 2 or 3 questions, and then we're all going to enjoy some lunch. So hands up. We'll go to you, sir, at the back near the camera. You've got your hand up. I know you've got a microphone. Off you go. Give us your name and a very quick question.
Hi, I'm Joshua. I'm a student in the United States. McKinsey is the most prestigious first job after college. And as such, you have tremendous power as a Jesuit of capitalism to influence what other firms do. It strikes me that some of the policies that McKinsey uses may be contributing to trends that were discussed as problematic in the first session, specifically short-term employment of just 1 to 2 years, and maybe also only recruiting at the institutions of significant power or prestige that exist already in academia. Do you agree that McKinsey may be contributing to those trends? And if so, or if not, what can you do to combat them?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. I'm sure we're contributing somehow to those trends, but I don't think in those ways. First of all, when we recruit people, we would like people to stay for the long term. We do have a sort of an up or out process. We want people to keep progressing, and most people who leave because they have something better they want to do. It's the laggards that stay behind, like myself, in it. But I think it's a place where it really is about trying to develop leaders, and most of the people actually leave, and I think that help. I feel proud of our alumni. We've got about 450 that are leading billion-dollar-plus companies, in leading social organizations or in cabinet role. That's a very important metric to me, so I feel good about about where that group's going.
What's the average shelf life of a McKinsey?
About 3.5 years.
Really?
Yeah, we have about a 20% turnover rate, and but the other thing now I forgot was
Well, you only recruit from the high.
Oh yeah, that's a great I think that has been the case. I really hope we've shifted that. So we hire about 5,000 people a year. We get about 800,000 CVs that come in. Most of those CVs come in electronically now. They don't come from actually going to the schools. We used to be very physical. This is a very bad statement I'll make, but in the 1960s, diversity at McKinsey meant we hired people from Wharton Business School versus Harvard. That was diversity in McKinsey. So we've been trying to evolve. They had this alternate a graduate degree program. I was in Oxford. I'd never heard about who McKinsey was. I only went to the recruiting event because they had free alcohol. And so I thought I would be able to, and then I went and I thought, this is a strange place. There was a big fear about, I was a non-MBA, and there was a concern, can a non-MBA add numbers? Do they know how to interact with people? I had special coaches to check all my numbers and all of that stuff. So we've broadened. That group's now about 40%. But this year, what we're doing, just to jolt our recruiting system, we're going to hire 5 people with no university degree. Okay, so now out of 5,000, you'll say that's a joke. I'm telling you, our recruiting people do not think that's a joke. Because what that means is to identify people who haven't come through a system that can screen, if you will, is complicated. And this is where actually technology can work. And we've developed, I'm probably talking too long, we developed a game. It's how you design a coral reef. And we put it out there, it's for anyone. And the person who won the game, got the highest score in that game, if you get 20 points on this, you get a prize. People don't know that you get a call from McKinsey Recruiting. And that's not the prize, by the way, that the people are looking for. What they look for is people can do it. And the first person to win it was a 14-year-old boy from Pune, India. That's not our target. And his mother wondered what sort of an operation we were too. But the point is, what we do is we can therefore find people, because I believe very strongly like that leadership and talent should not be defined by boxes and checklists of where you come. I've met so many amazing business leaders, government leaders. Paul Keating is one of my heroes from Australia. No university education, voted, IMF Treasurer of the Year, I think 2 times in a row, made major changes. So a long-winded way of saying, I think we have been that way. That's certainly not the focus now. We're looking for talent in whatever form it may mean. The challenge for us is how we can identify it in a efficient.
My challenge is squeezing 2 more questions in, because it's fascinating stuff. But we do, yes, sir, way over there, because we want to spread the room. So have you got a microphone? And we'll get you one. There you go. Quick as you can.
Now I have. I want to build on your question, Stephen, for Dominic. So when you advise restructuring, Dominic, do you also say, well, you will save $100 million, but put $20 million to help the people who are losing their jobs or retrain or reskill them? Is that now part of your plan and advice?
I'll be honest with you, it's not. There's not I don't want to say that this is the program, but that's I think where it's going. And I can tell you, I'm not allowed to talk about clients. I could name 5 clients where that is the case. And what I would say in those situations is there's no difficulty in convincing the client about that. They see that as well. We're working with I'm going to be careful how I say it, because you'll figure we're one of the largest employers in the world. That is a priority of the CEO, that when we think about the restructuring, if you think about retail, and we had a discussion last night with a bunch of business, this industry is going to have layoffs at a very significant rate quickly. There is no way that organization will have a license to operate if that's the way they work. So part of the solution is we have to figure out how to re-employ those people, whether it's in the company or outside the company. The other thing we're doing is, on our own volition, we look at a place like Stuttgart, right? And this isn't, you're going to go from diesel to electric vehicles, and we have to think very clearly about what's that going to mean for jobs and where it is. So the other thing we're trying to do is work in regions or with industry groups to say, what can we learn together to figure out how we move forward, and that's something that we're working on. But I don't think we're moving as fast as we should be on there. But it's a priority. This whole, we're calling it reskilling, is a very major priority for us as a firm, and it's not just for, if you will, a do-good thing. It's actually to do with our clients and where it is.
All right, we'll take one more and then we'll break for lunch. Ma'am, yeah, I'm going to go to you. There you go.
Hello, my name is Aya. I'm African with a Tunisian passport for now. I feel like this space, like this symposium, can fall into two things, which I'm hearing since yesterday. A very developed Eurocentric view, and the second, a conversation about technology and business that is divorced from human rights. So I want to know what you're talking about. What does it make? How does it make sense in Africa, where 70% of the population is offline, where the neoliberal system is underdeveloping our continent, including IMF and World Bank austerity measures, including multinational corporation exploitation, where basic human rights and service delivery like education is not delivered, and where you find a waithood generation waiting for adulthood, because the average age of African leaders is 66 in a continent that is 70% under 30. So please help me understand, make sense of what you're saying in Africa.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an excellent point, and I think, you know, Africa is the youngest continent on Earth. I think the 50% of people in Uganda are under the age of 16. That's a number I heard. So to your point, and it's one thing we talk about a digital divide. I think it's even much more exacerbated in Africa, irrespective of whether you're Rwanda or Botswana or whether you're, pick any other country in there. My personal view there is I think a lot of this has to be around the education system, education for employment. We have to get people to have the jobs that are required. I'm actually quite bullish on Africa and the opportunity. But this is, someone mentioned, I think in the previous panel, about welders. We were both talking about our children maybe going into welding, give it 170,000, something like that. It's very odd to me in Africa, and I've seen this, that there are companies that are having to import welders into Africa to do, right? Importing, why are we importing processed meat into many East African countries when you have some of the most flourishing agricultural lands? And so I think there's an education process that needs to, we have to work in order to skill people. I think it has to be different than our system here. We can't wait 4 years to put people through a system. I think we have to innovate how we do that. But I also think there's a role for the infrastructure to be put in place to enable the power to be able to do the jobs that are required in there. But my view is if we don't fix and improve the situation on jobs in Africa, it's going to be everyone's problem.
But isn't there a more fundamental point that in the end you still are a true believer in the capitalist system? And the argument from many in Africa would be that the exploitative nature of corporate and global capitalism is never going to be good for Africa as it goes through its journey of development, modernization, things that we've lived with for the last 300 years.
I don't believe that. I think that where the jobs are going to be created are from businesses that be able to move it, and there's a lot of business opportunity in that region. I think the question is why are there not as many of those businesses being created as there should be? I think part of it can be sometimes because of the stability of the system for people to invest and so forth. I think financial inclusion, which is at a very low level, needs to be increased for people to be able to participate. So I don't think it's a different system, but I think that there's some missing pieces that we all better be thinking about and work on. And education, I think, is a very important element of that. It's not I'm not saying that's the solution in where it is. But I think we need to figure that out, and we need to figure out, as I said, also the infrastructure to be able to have as I said, the power and the resources to be able to allow those businesses to form. But that.
Right, we have a message telling us in 3 words, time is up. I wish it weren't up, because as we've got Dominic here, it's just wonderful to tap into your insights, your experience, your knowledge, and listen to the way you see the world working today and the way it might work in 20, 30 years' time. But we do have to draw it to a close, ladies and gentlemen. For all of those people who want to present him with a CV, you better catch him quick, because he's got to head to Zurich quite soon. For the rest of us who want to stay around for the fascinating discussions we're going to have this afternoon, the good news is there is a lunch break. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's enjoy our lunches. But before we do that, give a very, very warm hand to Dominic Barton. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.